Kind thanks go to Brilliant for sponsoring today's episode. Today I'll explain to you what went wrong with Starship Serial number 9's test flight, how the FAA will actually help SpaceX with launches, and in the end of the show we'll have a huge update on SpaceX's Sea Launch platforms, including some concept work, so stay tuned.
What about it? Go for launch.
We're go for launch. Let's light this candle.
Ignition sequence start.
My name is Felix and I am your host for today's episode of What About It? And as always, there has been a lot going on in the space industry lately, so let's dive right in. Starship updates. What a week again. I am sorry for not having released a regular episode for so long. I've been following SpaceX and Serial number 9 with a few very long live streams, and I thank you all for enjoying the show together with me. And it was a show. Here are RGV Aerial Photography's latest views of Boca Chica, Texas, and this is the South Texas launch site as seen on Saturday of last week. SpaceX achieved an incredible milestone. You're not seeing double. These are two Starships on two test stands at the same time. Two prototypes to do tests with and in the end double the development speed. If you don't know about RGV and Mauricio yet, go check out his Patreon and become a flight supporter. He has shown so much dedication that he deserves the support. Anyone who followed our Starship Serial number 9 live streams closely knows that SpaceX would have loved to launch their latest prototype sooner. They were ready for a launch for a long time. The FAA did not give their permission though. One of the possible reasons being talked about right now is that SpaceX did not get a permission from the FAA to launch Starship Serial number 8 back in December. As a result of this non-compliance, the FAA required SpaceX to conduct an investigation of the incident. And the FAA is just sticking to the rules they have to enforce. If a SpaceX test launch would result in casualties or endanger the safety of the public in any way, the FAA would not have done their job right. Things have changed though. The launch industry is more and more relying on reusable rockets. More launches are conducted and Starship will bring even more change with an extremely fast launch cadence. And the FAA is actively working together with launch providers to rework these rules and streamline them to allow launch and re-entry vehicle operators to focus on innovation as it replaces cumbersome prescriptive requirements with flexible performance-based criteria. Part 450 is a new regulation guideline that already does a step into the right direction. Single license, early approvals, reduced timeframes. The final version of the new rule has been published in the US Federal Register on December 12, 2020, and it'll take effect 90 days from that day, which will be March 12th of this year. And what this shows is that the FAA has understood the need for a streamlined set of rules to accommodate new technology and the change that recent years brought to the launch industry. There will likely be more changes needed in the future, but this shows that the FAA is willing to and actively participating to make these changes happen. Good news for every Starship to follow Eileen. And while the FAA is getting ready to accommodate SpaceX's needs in the future, Musk's engineers are making sure that these new rules will be needed soon. This is the latest Starship test tank SN7.2. It's been put through its paces for the first time on January 26th and I commented it live on Lab Padre's 24/7 livestream together with Thomas. The plan for SpaceX and SN7.2 is to test new steel for future Starship prototypes. At the moment, SpaceX engineers are using 4mm steel sheets to craft Starship hulls. If Serial number 7.2 is successful, this might change soon. It is made of 3mm steel rings and 7.2 is testing whether the thinner steel is capable of taking the pressure needed for a Starship tank. In theory, this would mean 25% weight reduction on the hull. In reality though, this might just translate into weight savings of around 5 to 10%, but even that would mean that SpaceX would save up to 12 tons of weight, which in return would lead to a more capable Starship. Less dry weight means less fuel or more payload capacity in return. And 7.2 did not disappoint on its first run. SpaceX slowly ramped the pressure up more and more, and after over an hour of torture, they finally detanked the prototype again. No burst, no visual problems. Giving an answer on Twitter to Lewis from Lab Padre, Elon Musk confirmed that serial number 7.2 did indeed pass the initial pressure test. No numbers were given, but they should have been somewhere between 5 and 6 bar, as that's the tank pressure needed to perform an orbital flight with a Starship. Next, SpaceX will likely perform what's called a burst test, meaning that pressure is raised higher and higher until the tank gives in. This is done to determine the maximum pressure the design is able to take. Next up, we have Starship serial number 10's rollout in detail. While this is impressive on its own and an incredible achievement, the close encounter enabled locals to take some detailed pictures of the prototype. Maria Pointer from Starship Boca Chica, for example, was able to take a high-resolution shot of the heat shield attached to Starship serial number 10's hull as it rolled by. And SpaceX seems to be confident with the current tiles. You're looking at 203 Starship heat tiles attached to serial number 10, and yes, I counted them myself. Still, it's just a small spot on the hull. And those are not the only heat tiles to be found on Starship serial number 10 either. Besides the large chunk of 203 tiles sitting on the main methane tank, a smaller batch can be found directly under it on the main LOX tank. Since methane and oxygen are kept at different temperatures, SpaceX might be testing if the adhesive used to attach the tiles to the hull can take both temperature ranges. Further down on the hull there are two more badges of tiles. One attached to the outside right above the aft dome and the thrust puck, and one directly below it on the engine skirt. Again, two very different conditions. One will have to take the cold from the fuel and the vibrations from the thrust puck, and the other one will have to take the vibrations of the engines and at the same time be heated up. SpaceX no doubt is getting ready to build the first Starship with a complete heat shield, and those tests on serial number 10 will give them the data needed for the construction. Since for the first time we're also looking at a significant chunk of heat tiles, I did some calculation as to how many tiles we could be looking at to cover one entire half of a Starship. The large batch is made up of 203 tiles. Plastering one complete row of these batches on the hull all the way up to where the nose cone starts, we're looking at 13 of them, which would make it a crazy 2,639 tiles. Since we'd need at least another 2 rows of these tiles to cover the entire half, we're looking at 13 times 3 of the batches already, which would make it 39 in total and 7,917 tiles. And I don't think that it would fully cover one half in width yet, so let's add another 2,000 tiles just to be sure. That would make it 9,917 tiles. Now for the nose cone, things get more difficult as the circumference changes towards the tip. Let's just eyeball it here for the time and say we need another 4 badges, multiply by 3 so we can cover the entire cone, which brings us to another 2,436 tiles for the cone and to a total of 12,353 tiles. The Space Shuttle, for example, had a similar system at first glance. Here's some footage I took of the Space Shuttle Atlantis at Kennedy Space Center. Black heat tiles covering the nose and the complete underside. Even though comparable from the outside, those tiles were very different. While the heat shield on the Space Shuttle was extremely maintenance intensive, SpaceX wants to create the exact opposite. Every heat tile on a shuttle was unique. Every tile slightly different in shape, some larger and some smaller. The complete heat shield was composed of over 20,000 tiles, each specifically made for a single spot on the hull. All of them, for example, had to be dehydrated by hand before every launch, which is insane. On SpaceX's Starship, though, all the tiles have the same shape, all of them interchangeable and none of them needing special treatment. It doesn't come as a surprise that SpaceX will need far less of them as well, even though the covered area on the hull is much larger than on the Space Shuttle orbiter. One size fits all gives SpaceX a huge advantage. And on Tuesday, February 2nd, we all got to see what we'd been patiently waiting for a while.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Starship serial number 9 took flight and we watched it live together with 700,000 other SpaceX enthusiasts. Thank you all so much for joining the Y family for another historic flight attempt. This time the FAA had approved the flight and SpaceX lit the candle. 3 Raptor engines ignited just fine and propelled the prototype up into the Boca Chica sky. John Innsbrucker, Mr. Nominal, gave us the honor of doing the live commentary and tension was high. The same picture as on the Starship serial number 8 launch. Engines shutting down on ascend, With a slightly lower altitude, serial number 9's flight went up to 10 kilometers instead of 12.5. Handover to the header tanks at apogee and a flip maneuver to horizontal to start the skydive. At 4 minutes and 44 seconds into the flight, we were able to see some incredible movement from the aft flaps. These flaps are huge and still they are able to move incredibly quick. At 6 minutes and 10 seconds, beneath 1.5 kilometers of height, the Starship prepared for engine relight and the flip to vertical for the landing, and this is where first signs of problems started to visibly occur. At 6 minutes and 22 seconds, right after engine relight, a piece of debris can be seen flying away from the prototype, likely a result of an internal explosion. One of the turbopumps must have blown up. The plan was to relight 2 engines for the flip and then do a 1-engine landing burn, but at least one of the 2 engines did not relight properly. A fire can also be seen at the base of the second Raptor engine, which at least managed to relight properly. This could mean that engine number 2 also had problems with the pre-burners inside the turbopumps. Even being at the full 15-degree gimbal, the one running engine was not able to perform the transition into the vertical position though. And with a beautiful drone shot panorama, we watched Starship serial number 9 hit the landing pad almost broadside, which of course resulted in an incredible explosion. Lab Padre was able to present us with a goosebump close-up view of the pad while the crash happened. The nose cone got ripped off. White gas poured out, likely from the header tanks, and a large amount of COPVs installed inside of the nose tip. It was a sight to behold. With Starship SN10 on the pad next to it, test tank SN7.2 in sight, and the fuel farm close by, questions came up fast if anything critical got damaged during the crash. Mauricio from RGV Aerial Photography came to the rescue immediately and did a flyby on the next day, just hours after the crash. These pictures show the SpaceX landing pad with the debris of serial number 9 scattered all over the place. Luckily, Starship SN9 hit the deck with the nose pointing away from Highway 4 and the engine section pointing towards it. The explosion propelled the debris away from the nose and the aft section. This in return resulted in almost no damage to the infrastructure and the prototypes on site. The FAA has already begun an investigation of the incident and the cause of the failure, and there still is no official word from SpaceX or Musk as to what exactly went wrong. We also of course made a new shirt commemorating the serial number 9 launch. Grab it on the store if you want to show that you were part of a historic moment. You can find a link in the description of the video. My guess is that we might see a full heat shield as soon as Starship serial number 15 or 16. They will likely have to build one and test it on a high altitude flight before going orbital. What do you think? When will we see a full Starship heat shield? Tell me in the comments. The Y family needs your support. Give the video a like, subscribe and share it with your friends on Twitter or Facebook to show the YouTube algorithm that you appreciate the content. Gain access to our Discord server where you can meet me and the rest of the team or get a completely ad-free release of each and every episode provided just for members. Or do you know about the Y Warehouse? Shop for your next Starship shirt and look as awesome as you feel. Links can be found in the description. You rock. Starship Sea Launch update. Next up, we're talking a news topic that couldn't be more interesting. SpaceX is in the process of building 2 Starship Sea Launch platforms, and they are now working on both of them at the same time. Let's start this one with another incredible video from RGV Aerial Photography. It shows DEIMOS, one of the 2 SpaceX Sea Launch platforms at Brownsville Harbor. Work has just begun in Brownsville, and if we look closer, we can already see the effect. Pipes are being ripped out and SpaceX workers seem to slowly start the transformation process. Soon the 2 cranes on top of the oil rig will be put to use as well. SpaceX has already hired operators for the job. And the same goes for platform number 2. Phobos has been docked in the harbor of Pascagoula, Mississippi, and work has started here too. A huge thank you goes out to Donna McLeod, a local resident, for taking these pictures. Check out her Twitter at Donna McLeod6 for future updates. Thank you, Donna, you rock. Right now it's hard to predict what these platforms will look like, but we can try, right? Nick and I have been brainstorming some more, and our Sea Launch platform concept is slowly taking shape. And it will be a difficult task for SpaceX to fit everything needed for a Starship launch on the platform. The base structure is kept intact. Pontons and float structure will remain the same. We decided against connecting the two rigs together as SpaceX likely wants to have two separate launch platforms and as connecting them wouldn't be that easy either. Extensive structural changes would be needed and they'd likely have to be lifted into a dry dock to achieve the goal. A fuel farm would be needed as well. Since SpaceX has space below the main deck, this would be one of the possible options as it gives some great protection for the tanks. Refilling could be done by tanker ships and a constant supply could be achieved either from SpaceX's own oxygen and methane production, ramping up in Boca Chica, Texas right now, or from other harbors equipped for the task. Recently, news has been surfacing of the two companies Pilot LNG and GAC Bunker Fuels to build a floating LNG bunker at Galveston Harbor near Houston, Texas. These kinds of bunkers would be one way for SpaceX to have the needed infrastructure to fuel a Starship Sea Launch platform with a tanker ship in quick succession. When it comes to Starship launches, quick turnaround will be essential for SpaceX. A constant fuel supply would be needed and lots of it too. Such a tanker barge would provide fuel for a single Starship. Two of them would be needed for a Starship launch and they could constantly ferry fuel between the coast and the platform. On the main deck we placed our ever-growing launch tower. In this case we added a second crew access arm to the structure to support point-to-point travel with Starships and without a super heavy booster. The tower now features a stacking crane, two crew access arms and a super heavy catch mechanism. All no problem on a single Sea Launch platform. We also left the helipad on the deck for quicker access for passengers. Musk has stated numerous times that he'd love to build VTOL supersonic electric jets. Now that couldn't possibly be handy to ferry passengers from and to a Sea Launch platform over short distances, right? Just saying. We also put at least a minimal number of buildings on the main deck. SpaceX will need a launch control and some sort of crew and passenger accommodations and maintenance facilities. We're not really sure as to how to protect them. Since boosters and Starships will fire their engines through openings in the main deck in our concepts, most of the blast will go to the underside of the deck. A launch wouldn't cause an unsolvable problem, but the deck structure will need proper protection in case something goes wrong. We're still figuring it out, but we'll evolve the concept over time. Last but not least, we have safety boats on the Sea Launch platform. In case of an emergency, SpaceX will have to be able to quickly evacuate the platform. Lifeboats pose a special challenge on oil rigs, and right now this is solved with a freefall. What you're looking at here is the standing world record of a 60-meter drop release of such a boat. There are regulations in place and SpaceX will have to follow them. I wouldn't be surprised though if Musk comes up with a unique idea for that too. What are your thoughts? Are we getting closer to a realistic solution? What are your thoughts when it comes to the change Phobos and DEIMOS will have to go through to become our gateway to Mars? Leave a comment to start the discussion. Ever thought about entering the launch industry, become a part of what you love most? Check out Brilliant, a website and app that makes learning interactive, accessible and fun. Their approach is based on problem solving and active learning. It's about seeing concepts visually and interacting with them and then answering questions that get you to think. Their courses are laid out like a story and broken down into pieces so that you can tackle them a little bit at a time. No tests, no grades, just pick up a course based on what you'd like to learn and get started. Made a mistake? No big deal, just check out the detailed explanation. There's something for everybody, whether you want to brush up on basics of cryptocurrency, quantum computing or statistics. How likely was a year like 2020 to actually happen? To learn things the Brilliant way and at the same time support What About It, go to brilliant.org/whataboutit and sign up to try out over 60 interactive courses for free. And if you choose to get the premium subscription, the first 200 people to join through the link will get 20% off the annual premium subscription. Learn new things the Brilliant way. Links in the description. Today's YouTube and Patreon shoutout goes to Philip Bailey, Jordan Strait, Eero Rantala, Jonas Aust, Dory Ownbay, Armand Labossiere, Arpeggio Blues, Nathan Steer, Ron C, Vladimir Fejes, Default Name, Ken Dittrich, Chris Schraven, Belly Hovenkamp, Dukeman, MMC, James Daug, David Sixta, Paul Lane, Quentin 46, Dan Simpson, David Kentner, Christopher Howard, Henry J3, Rod Clear of Salem Fine Woodworking, Tom Frausto, Mark Lawrence, Edwin Wright, Michael Pollock, Kim Ole Schelde, Maciej Stansky, John B. Leonard Jr., James Brandenburg, Lord Chaos, Marcus Obelsberger, Rocketman 666, Pepper Beardo, Chris Doughton, Jesse Dubiel, Stefan Ivanovic, and many others. You rock! That's a lot of people. Thank you so much for becoming a patron or a YouTube member, and do not forget to hop on our Discord. Enjoy your first ad-free release. Welcome to the Y family. Today's team shoutout goes to everyone who moderated the live streams during the past week. Thank you so much for putting in so many hours. While everyone was watching Starship Serial number 9 with me, these people made sure that I knew who to shout out for and that I'd get all the questions and all the info surrounding the launch attempts. Thank you so much, you rock. In case of an emergency, now comes the big splash. They are an important is willing to and actively would lead to a more capable Starship. God. Nose cone start and the nose cone hired operators for the job.